Today I'm going to show you how to draw an apple in Adobe Illustrator. This is the final product, and this is where we're going to start. I want you to notice that I have two layers on my layers panel on the right. The bottom layer has a photo of the apple, and it is locked, and then I have a level above it where I'm going to begin tracing the apple. So to start with, we're going to use our pen tool. And I don't want to fill, so I'm going to make sure my fill's in the front, and I'm going to hit none. Now I just have a black stroke. I'm going to trace around the exterior of the apple. I'm going to click and let go with my mouse, and now I've got my little point in my string. I'm going to ignore the stem. I'm going to come over here, click and hold. I'm going to hit that curve as best I can, click and let go. Now I'm going to click and let go on this point right here, and you'll see this part of the handlebar disappear. So I click and let go, it disappears. There's a little dent in here, so I'm going to click and hold, click and let go on that center point, click and hold, click and let go on that center point, click and hold, click and let go on that center point, click and hold, click and let go on that center point, click and hold, click and let go, click and hold, click and let go. The key when doing this is to try to use as few points as possible. You get too many and your apple's going to start to look like it's got angles on it, and we don't want a geometric apple. Now, I've just finished tracing the outline of the apple. I'm going to take my black selection arrow, I'm going to click on my line and move it over. Now, a mistake people often make is they will go to click on the line and they'll be like, it doesn't move, it doesn't move. Well, that's because it's clear. Remember, we have none for the fill, so there's nothing to grab in here. You have to actually click on the physical line that you drew, and then you can move it over. Now, what we want to trace are all of the highlights on the apple. So I'm going to zoom in with my navigator. If you don't see your navigator, go to Window. Everything lives under Window. And I'm going to go back to my pen tool, and I'm going to trace this organic highlight shape right here. Oops. See how I messed up? I didn't actually hit the point. Control Z to undo. Now I can hit my point. Control Z is one of your best friends when you make mistakes in Illustrator. So I'm just going to trace this organic shape and make it a completed shape. Now, to click off of this, I'm going to hit the Enter key on my keyboard. It still looks highlighted, but it's not. Now I can come over and trace this one. See how it released the outline from the other one? So Enter will allow you to release a shape that you've traced and continue on to the next one. So I'll just do a couple here real fast. So the more realistic your apple is based on how many details you put in it, how many shapes you trace, how many little nuances of color you have. So I'm going to pause the video and come back real quick. So I paused the video real quick so that I could finish tracing all of the main shapes of my apple. Now what I want to do is change the color of all of these shapes. So all I do is click with my black selection arrow on the outline that I've drawn, and I come down about 11 tools to this eyedropper. All I do is I click inside of the shape, and the stroke disappears and becomes a fill. Now if I do that and I don't like the color, I can just Control Z and pick another color. There's a lot of different shades inside all of these, so you may have to click a few times to get the right color. So again, all you do is take your black selection arrow, click on a shape, take your eyedropper, and fill it in. And you can see I've traced a lot of different pieces on my apple. That's going to make it look more realistic when I go to change my colors. I have finished tracing, not tracing, but changing the color of all of my shapes. So now I'm going to take my black selection arrow, grab this outline I did at the beginning, line it up with my apple. If you have trouble lining it up, you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard to move it around. And now with that highlighted, I'm going to use my eyedropper to pick up the remaining apple color. Now I've got a fairly decent vector drawing of an apple. What I want to do is to begin to shade and feather all of these shapes so they blend in with my apple. So to do that, I click on a shape with my black selection arrow. I go Effect on the top toolbar, Stylize Feather. So Effect, Stylize Feather. Now I'm going to check the preview button and you see my shape entirely disappeared. The radius here is too high. So I'm going to take it down quite a bit. See how it's starting to show up? That was just way too intense. See, you can even see it starting to fade over here. And now it's barely doing anything at all. So I want it to fade a little, but not so much that it disappears. So I'm going to leave it at 0.125 and say OK. Now, this shape is smaller than this shape. So 0.025 may be too much. So I'm going to go Effect, Stylize, Feather. Ooh, that's actually pretty good. That's really nice. Okay, I'm going to keep that. So I'm just going to go through here and really quickly feather all of my shapes. Now, you see where it says Apply Feather right here? It will apply the last feather options you selected, but I don't like to do that because each shape is a different size. See how that one fades away? And that's the same feather options I had last time. So I don't want to do that. So I want to try maybe 0.07. I'm going to hit my preview. Ooh, see, that's better. So sometimes you have to hand enter a number to get the right effect. See, 0.07 works for this. So the ones that are a little bit smaller need a smaller radius number. I might even take this down to 0.05. Yeah, there we go. I have a little bit of a shadow on top of my stem. Ooh, see, that's too much. Let's try 0.03. There we go. And see, that's not enough. Let's try 0.9. What's that look like? There we go. So there's a lot of tweaking of the numbers to make the feather tool work right. And then we're going to tweak it even more. We're going to drop the opacity on most of these. Okay, so now this is starting to look a lot like an apple, but like I said, we can drop the opacity and make these blend more. So opacity lives under transparency. And again, if you don't see transparency, go to Window and open it up. But with this highlighted with my black selection arrow, I can go to my opacity and I can make that much more subtle. It doesn't need to be quite that intense. It's also important to go back and forth and look at your reference image. See this highlight? It's pretty subtle, but I've got it pretty dramatic over here. So now I know to click on that and drop my transparency down some more. Now that I've dropped the opacity on all of my little shapes, it's time to put that texture on there. When you look at the reference photo, you see there's a bit of a texture to the apple. We want to try to mimic that. So I'm going to highlight the solid outline of the apple. I'm going to select Control-C on my keyboard to copy and then Control-V on my keyboard to paste. So now I've got a copy of the outline of the apple. With this highlighted with the black selection arrow, I'm going to go Effect, Pixelate, Pointillize. So Effect, Pixelate, Pointillize. It's going to show me a bunch of dots. I can make it really obscene, or I can take it back smaller so it looks a little bit more like that texture of the actual apple. I don't want it too big. And I'm going to say OK. Now this looks pretty dramatic, very unrealistic. I'm going to go back to that transparency panel and I'm going to change it from normal to multiply. See how all of the white disappears where it's overlapping my apple? That helps to make it more realistic. Now it's still way too intense. So I'm going to drop the opacity quite a bit. Now we're really starting to get somewhere, but I'm hiding all of these great values that I put in there. So I'm going to shuffle the deck. I'm going to right click, arrange, send it back. Now I don't see it because the pixelated version is hiding behind the solid layer. So now I'm going to click on the solid outline layer, right click, arrange, send it back. Now I've shuffled that deck. I have the solid red, then the pixelated red, and now I have all of my little values. So now I can click on that pixelated one and maybe even make it a little bit more subtle. And now I have my own hand-drawn vector apple. And there you go. Easy peasy, thanks to the pen tool. I hope you guys are able to make your own apple.